Hi, and welcome to the second video in our Proxmox series. In the first video, we went ahead and we configured our Proxmox virtual environment on our laptop or our desktop or our server in our home lab. And that was pretty much it. In this video, we're actually going to go ahead and we are going to download an ISO directly to our Proxmox virtual environment and also configure a Windows Server 2025 on our Proxmox using the best practices. So I already have a Windows Server 2025 built using the default settings. So we're actually going to build one together using the best practices. I'm going to be able to show you the comparison between the two on why using certain drivers and certain settings are going to make your life a whole lot better, especially if you're running this in a home lab or if you're trying to prepare to convert your production work environment from VMware to Proxmox, or just starting using Proxmox, or if you're already in a workplace that's using Proxmox and you're wanting to level up your skills. So let's go ahead and let's first go to our IP address of our Proxmox box, which for me was just the 192.168.50.132, and we're going to specify the port 8006, and this is going to ask you for your login. This is going to be the login that we set up in that first video. You're going to want to make sure that your realm here is set to Linux PAM standard authentication and not Proxmox Virtual Environment Authentication Server, because we have not created a user yet on the Proxmox Virtual Environment Authentication Server. We only have our actual Linux authentication here. So we're going to put in our username root, and we are going to put in our password that we set up during the setup here, and we're going to click on login. And now we are going to actually be in our system here. So you guys are going to see your Proxmox on the side here. If you go ahead and expand that, I have one here that's called 100, and we have Windows Server 2025. You guys will not see this. This is that server that I already pre-built using just the default standards that Proxmox offers you. We're actually going to be building one with the best practices. But before we can actually go ahead and build a virtual machine, we need the ISOs in order to actually build that. So we're going to go ahead and click on the local Proxmox here, and we're going to click on ISO images. And here you're going to have multiple options. You're going to have upload and download from URL. Now, upload will probably work fine in a home lab environment, but if you're in a production environment, download from URL is probably going to be much quicker because you're probably not going to be at the same site as your Proxmox server, more than likely, especially if you're working from home. That upload will be limited by the networks that you're connected to. So I usually like to do the download from URL. Now, what that is actually going to prompt you, it's going to prompt you for the URL of the download. So what we're actually going to go ahead and do is we're going to find that URL for the download for Windows Server 2025 together. So we're going to open up a new tab here, and we're going to go to our favorite search browser, whichever that is. For me, it's Google. It could be DuckDuckGo, anything like that. And you're just going to want to search for Windows Server 2025. If you just search for Windows Server 2025, you should see one that comes up as Windows Server 2025 Microsoft Evaluation Center. If you go ahead and you click on that, it's going to give you an option here to download the ISO. You're going to click on that, and it's going to prompt you for some information. So you're just going to fill this in here. We're just going to fill it in with the information that you guys know here. And then we're just going to put in our region here. And I almost put in my real phone number. That would not be good. All right, and then we're going to hit just download now. And this is going to bring you to this page. Now it's going to say, please select your Windows Server 2025 download. Now, if you click on just the 64-bit English United States version here, you're going to notice that it just basically starts downloading. And we're just going to cancel this. What we're going to want to do is right click on this, hit copy link, and then we're going to go back to the Proxmox server, and we are going to paste that in here and then hit query URL. And as you can see, we can actually see that there is a file size here of 5.6 gigs, and it is actually going to download our ISO. So if we actually go ahead and we click on download there, you're going to see that for me, it already exists. So I'm getting an error, but what you're going to see is basically a download progress of that ISO. And it's going to go really quickly because it's downloading directly to that box, especially if you are hardwired, which you pretty much are with Proxmox at this point. It should go very quickly, especially depending on your internet connection, but it will definitely be faster than downloading it on your computer and then having to upload it to your server, because you're just downloading it once. You don't have that second step of having to then upload it. Of course, if you already have an ISO and you don't need to download it again, uploading is definitely, by all means, a very good option. The other thing that we're going to want to download before we actually build our virtual machine is going to be the VirtIO drivers. Now, I'm going to have that link. I'm going to have the link to the Windows Server ISO as well in the description down below. So you can just go ahead and copy it there. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to copy the link for the VirtIO drivers. You can already see them that they're there. They're going to be in the description down below, but you're going to do the same thing. You're going to download from a URL, paste those in there, and then query. And then you're going to see that we get the VirtIO Windows drivers. And it's a pretty small little download that you're going to be able to do. And once you have both of those, we are actually good to go and ready to build our virtual machine. So let's go back to our Proxmox here. And let's just click on Create VM at the top right here. And once we click on that, we're actually then going to go ahead and just name our machine here. So let's go Win 2025 BP for best practices. And for this, you don't really need to do anything specific. I like already having the advanced option open. But once you have that, you can go ahead and click on next. Now for the OS, you're going to go ahead and select that server OS that we've downloaded just a couple minutes ago. And then the guest OS type, you're going to want to change that to Windows. And you're going to want to make that version 11, 2022, or 2025. And then what we can actually do is add an additional drive for VirtIO drivers. And we can actually go ahead and pick the VirtIO win.iso, which is going to be the ISO for those VirtIO drivers, because we're going to need those, because you're going to see during the install, because of some of the selections that we pick, we're not actually going to be able to see our hard drive just yet. We'll actually need those additional drivers. And let's go ahead and let's click on next. Now in system here, what we're actually going to want to do is for the SCSI controller, we're going to want to pick VirtIO SCSI here, not the single. You're going to want to check mark the QEMU agent. And then the EFI storage, we're going to pick the local LVM, and TPM storage, we're also going to pick the local LVM. Graphics card can stay as default, machine can stay as Q35, and BIOS can stay as the OVMF UEFI. That is completely fine. And we're going to click on next here. And now for the disk here, we are actually going to want to change the cache from default to write back. And we're going to want to check mark this disk card. Now what this disk card actually does is it lets the hard drive trim. So it's not going to actually take up that whole additional space here. And then it should be good. I'm going to leave my drive as 32 gigs. You can definitely expand that as much as you really want. You can always make your hard drives bigger later on. But because this is just a home lab environment and this is just going to be really a basic Windows server for me at this point, we're going to let that as 32 gigs. But I would probably, if you're going to be using this for Active Directory or like a file server or anything like that, maybe bump that up to 50 or 100, depending on what your allowance is, depending on how big your hard drive that Proxmox is sitting on and how many machines you want to have on there as well. And the cache for write back, that's going to be mostly for performance. The default no cache is definitely safer, but it is quite a bit slower. So I definitely prefer the write back cache, and that is the best practice as well. And we're going to click on next here. Now for the CPU, you're going to want to actually just increase the cores and not necessarily the socket. So if you want a 2 CPU machine, you're going to want to increase the cores to 2 and not the sockets to 2. Like if we do sockets 2, you're still going to see cores, but the performance will actually be better if we just increase the cores to 2. And then here we have the type of CPU. Now this is very, very important to keep in mind. You can do a virtualized CPU, or you can pick host. Now, in a home lab environment, I would probably recommend more a virtualized CPU. The x86-64 V2 AES is, in my opinion, perfectly fine. It does actually work quite well. Some people do have issues with it and they prefer KVM64. It will really depend on what CPU you have in your machine, on how well it could emulate it, as well as if you are working in a cluster. So if you are in a home lab environment where you know you're only going to have the one machine, I would pick host. If you're not going to have it in a cluster, you're going to have a standalone Proxmox server, pick host. It will make your life a lot easier and you'll have a lot better performance. Now, if you are making it in a cluster where you might have live migrations of virtual machines, meaning it can go from one server to the other in your cluster, if you pick host, but those two machines do not have the same CPU, you will have issues. You will probably get blue screens and you will have machines that will not boot anymore. So you're going to want to make sure in a cluster environment that either all of your machines have the exact same CPU, or you use the virtualized CPUs and have them all the same. So in my case, because it's just going to be a standalone machine, we are going to pick host here, but that is something to consider when you are choosing your CPU type. Is it going to be in a clustered environment? And is in my cluster environment, are all the machines going to be the same CPU? In an ideal production environment, let's say you have 4 servers that you're running Proxmox on, you would buy the 4 all at the same time with the exact identical specs, so you would have a very strong cluster. And in that case, you would be able to pick host, not a problem. But in a home lab, getting multiple machines of the same CPU sometimes is quite hard, especially if you're using new to you or like refurbished equipment. But we're going to select host because it's just a standalone setup here. For memory, I like to just keep it at 4096, so 4 gigs of RAM. You will see ballooning device is enabled by default. That is okay. We are actually going to be doing a driver setup for that as well. And we're going to hit next here. And for the network, you will want to actually go ahead and leave it as the VirtIO para-virtualized on the bridge. That will be fine. And if we click next here, now this is where you will notice that we have a IDE 0 and a IDE 2 for our 2 CD-ROM drives here for our 2 images. We're going to have to invert those. So it's not super hard. I have not seen a spot where you can actually do it right here, especially if you do this checkbox here. So just keep that in mind. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and we are going to confirm. We are not going to start after created. We're just going to hit finish. And that's going to create our virtual machine here. And we can see our Win 2025 BP. We're going to click on hardware here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to edit the IDE 0, and we are going to select our Windows ISO. And then our IDE 2, we are going to go ahead and select our VirtIO. What I've noticed is a lot of times the boot order will pick the IDE 0 by default. You can obviously change your boot order as well. But I find it just a lot easier just changing the ISO order. And then we can go ahead and click on start here. And let's go into the console, which is going to load up our no VNC. So we're going to get a press any key to boot from CD. And I did not do that fast enough. So let's just reboot that here. Just taking a little bit of time, so let's just wait for that to come back. All right, so here we go. We're just going to press any key, and it's going to start loading the files, and then we're actually going to be going into our Windows setup here. And here we have it. So here we're actually just going to click on next. And then what I like to actually do is do a previous version of a setup here. This is going to take you to the older way of setting it up. We're just going to hit next and then install now. And then we're going to set up just the standard evaluation desktop experience. And let's go ahead and I accept the terms. And here we're going to want to do a custom install here. And now you're going to see, where do you want to install Windows Server? And we actually have no hard drives here. So what you're going to want to do is click on load driver. And we're just going to click on OK here, actually. And then first, we are going to select our 2K25 VirtIO SCSI, and then click on next. And that is going to install the drivers that we need for the actual disk interaction. So we're going to be able to see our hard drive at that point. But what we actually still need is another driver here. So we're going to click browse, and we're going to want to go into our CD drive, and we're going to want to go net KVM, and then 2K25 AMD64. Click on OK, and then click on next. Now this is going to install the network drivers that we need. And then we're just going to wait for that to finish. And we have one more driver to load in. We're going to hit browse. We're going to go into the VirtIO. And then we are going to go balloon 2K25 AMD64 and click on OK. And click on next. And this is going to install the memory ballooning drivers. Once we have all of those, we can actually just go ahead and continue on with our setup here. So we're just going to click on next, and it's going to actually be doing the typical Windows install. This actually doesn't take too long on the Proxmox boxes I've found. It's still going to take a few minutes, so we're just going to actually pause the recording. We're going to come back once all of this is done. All right, so the install is done, and it's just rebooting here. So we're going to get prompted as it's just going to be starting these services, getting Windows ready. Just a very typical Windows install at this point. And then we will be able to see the differences between our default configuration and our best practices configuration. The big difference is going to be in that disk write and read speeds. They are quite vastly different, which is going to make a big difference in a home lab environment, and especially a production environment, if you are primarily using Windows servers. So it's still just getting ready here. And you're going to see it reboot a couple times, just like a very standard Windows server install. It usually does take a few reboots, and then you're going to get to this screen here, which is going to prompt you for the administrator password here. So this is where you're just going to configure your local administrator password. And we're going to set that up and then click on finish. And this is going to then load you into your Windows environment. Now, once you get to this screen on where it says press Control Alt Delete to unlock, you might wonder, how can I do the Control Alt Delete? You're going to click on this little hide show control bar here. Click on the little show extra keys. And then at the bottom here, there's going to be the send Control Alt Delete. And then after that, you could then type in your administrator password and you're going to be able to log in just fine. So once that's loaded in here, we're actually going to be able to show you guys the difference between the two systems. All right, and then it's just going to be asking for some of the diagnostics. I'm just going to do the required only here, and then the server manager is going to pop open. So what I'm going to do here, just to actually do a fair comparison of the two servers as well, is let's just let that on. Let's go to the other Windows server. I'm just going to start it, so this way they are both running at the same time. It's not like we're going to be doing the tests on the one Windows server box while there's only one VM running, and then the other one while there's two VMs running. We are going to do them both while both VMs are running. And we're just going to go ahead and log into this one here. So again, this one was configured using just the default that Proxmox gives you. So we would have went through the setup. We wouldn't have done any different SCSI controllers. We wouldn't have done the VirtIO drivers. It would have just been very, very basic on how we would have actually set that up. So we can actually close this. And what we're going to do to actually do this test is we are going to open up a command prompt as administrator here on the two boxes. So there is the one box and then our other box here. And you could probably already notice that one is significantly faster than the other, as in the best practice one is significantly faster. But let's go ahead, and this is going to be on the best practice box here. We're going to run the command winsat space disk space dash drive C. And we're going to run that here, and it's going to do a bunch of different tests to see the read write speeds here. And we can actually see that our random read speed is 409 megabytes per second, which is pretty great. The read speeds is 1945 megabytes per second, and then the sequential write is 2100 megabytes per second. So we can also see the scores here as well. Closer to 10, the better. And we can see here the latencies are pretty good. And now if we actually go ahead into our Windows Server 2025 here, which was just configured using the default, if we do a winsat disk dash drive C, if we go ahead and we run those, we can still see it's running still decently fast, but we will see here that the read speeds, we go from just over 400 megabytes per second in the random read to just over 200. So we've lost about half the speed there. The sequential read on the default setup is 680 megabytes per second versus what we had, which was just over 1900. So we have like about a third of a loss of the performance actually. So we are about we are 3 times faster with the best practice. The sequential write was the best practice. We're just under 2200. We're 2176. And in the default, we are sitting at 364. So again, like a 5-6 times better performance using the best practices. And here you can even see all the latencies here. We're at 0.3, 0.7, 12, and 0.3. And if we actually go onto our best practices, we're 0.1, 0.2, 2.5, and 0.1. So significantly better performance using these best practices. So I definitely highly recommend that if you are building a Windows Server VM on Proxmox, please try to follow the best practices. You can also find them on the Proxmox website. That's where I got all of mine as well. They don't go into detail about on the best practices. They won't go into detail about that CPU with the live migration, but that is in the Proxmox documentation as well, to really avoid choosing host if you are wanting to do a live migration, unless you can confirm that all of your hosts will have the same CPU. That is really the main takeaway there as well. And in the next video, we're actually going to be taking a look at how we can bring up the Ubuntu servers. So we're going to be doing the exact same thing, but with the Ubuntu server OS instead of Windows 2025. We're going to load in that ISO with the URL download and go all for that. So that is it for this video on how to set up a Windows Server virtual machine on Proxmox. Now you guys have a working Windows virtual machine. You guys can set up everything you guys need. And one other thing, if you guys did want to set up for some reason a Hyper-V or use Windows subsystem for Linux with Proxmox, you will need to set up that CPU to host more than likely, because Hyper-V will need it. It usually doesn't run very well and doesn't like to be running on a virtualized CPU. It will need direct access to that CPU. So just something to keep in mind as well, depending on what you want to have in your Proxmox. It would be weird to have Proxmox running Hyper-V, but if that is how you want to practice a Hyper-V environment, then that could definitely be an option for you. And that is it for this video. If you guys want to see anything specific in Proxmox, please let me know in the comment section down below. There will be videos shortly as well. Once we do this all basic setup, we're going to be interacting with the API through PowerShell. So if there's anything specific you guys would like to see for that, let me know in the comment section down below as well. If you guys liked this video, please hit subscribe, hit that like button. Also, be sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.